Thank you, Sir George, and it's a pleasure to serve under you this afternoon. Can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Stockport, for obtaining this debate. It's been an interesting discussion. At some points, I felt I was listening to a sort of display of Marxist economic analysis, but actually some quite important points have been raised. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to address in detail a lot of the points because they do relate either to the Competition Authority or indeed national security. And the Honourable Gentleman for Rhondda was correct in directing a lot of his concerns, particularly around the competition impact to the CMA, which will obviously have to examine this potential merger. And there is also a national security mechanism in place, which he will be aware of. I will make a few more remarks about that, but it has also given me an opportunity to say something about the importance of mobile connectivity and the 5G technology, which has enormous potential to transform public services and make our workplaces more effective, connecting healthcare workers, vehicles, traffic flows, etc., etc. And we reckon that widespread adoption of 5G could see £159 billion in productivity benefits across sectors by 2035. And the Prime Minister has set out the ambition of the UK to be the leading science and technology superpower by 2030. And if we are to achieve that aim, then connectivity is going to play an absolutely critical role. And therefore, to reach that point, we will rely heavily on the investment by the mobile companies, and we are in regular dialogue with them. As the Honourable Gentleman knows, the deal that is on the table between Vodafone UK and Three UK will be subject to regulatory approvals. This debate has concentrated a lot on the potential national security implications, and I will say a little bit about that, and as also on the competition impacts. In general, the government welcomes investments into the UK which will support growth and jobs, which will meet our legal and regulatory requirements and do not compromise our national security. But as I think everybody who has participated in the debate has stressed, the security of critical national infrastructure is of prime importance. This government has a strong record in putting in place much tougher measures through such things as the National Security and Investment Act and the Telecoms Security legislation. And in particular, the Honourable Gentleman will be, and other members will be aware of the actions that have been taken around Huawei and the removal of Huawei technology from the core network. The Honourable Gentleman referred to that and the target of achieving that by the end of 2027. I can tell him that we are on track, and only this week I announced further incentives to establish the Open RAN network, which will increase the diversification of our telecoms supply market. And in terms of competition, that is obviously a matter for the Competition and Markets Authority to assess the impact on both the market and indeed consumers. And the government does not have a role in the decision which will be taken by the Competition and Markets Authority. That has been long established in competition policy, that these matters are determined by an independent regulator. There has been concern expressed by the Honourable Gentleman for Stockport about and indeed others, about the potential on jobs. That essentially is a commercial matter for the company. Yes, it is the case that Vodafone have announced the loss of 11,000 jobs globally over the course of the next 3 years, and obviously that is a matter of regret. Those are difficult decisions, but they are commercial ones for the company, and there's no reason to believe that that the merger is going to add to that number. That is something which again will be taken into account in the examination of the case for the merger. And the honourable gentleman referred in his opening remarks to the analysis which I think the Union had done over what had happened when a similar merger had taken place in Australia. However, we would say to him that every market is different, and you cannot extrapolate from what happened in Australia, where there is different timings, with different state of the market, different network providers, to reach conclusions about the impact here. Equally, the impact on price rises. Obviously, we recognise that this is a difficult time for many people who face significant challenges with the cost of living. And actually, I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the mobile operators, which include Three and Vodafone, who have done a lot to try and support consumers through these difficult times, not only during the current rise in the cost of living, but throughout the pandemic over the last few years, in particular by bringing forward social tariffs for those on low incomes, donating millions of gigabytes of data to the National Data Bank, and providing devices through the National Device Bank. And that has offered real assistance to those who are finding it hardest to meet the cost of connectivity, which has been recognised in this debate and in previous ones to be no longer just a luxury, but an absolutely essential of modern life. There are now 27 providers of social tariffs, with millions of households eligible. I would like to see a greater take-up than has so far been achieved, but that is something we are pursuing to try and publicise to potential claimants their eligibility for social tariffs. And strong competition in the mobile market has managed to keep prices in this country relatively low compared to many others like Italy, Germany, Spain, France, and the USA. Consumers and benefits are now beginning to see the benefits that 5G can offer. I was intrigued that most of the speakers in this debate did not mention the state of coverage in their constituency, and that's possibly because at the present time, estimates are that 100% coverage has been achieved in Stockport, in Liverpool Riverside, in Glasgow North West, and in Birkenhead. Not quite in the honourable gentleman's constituency for the Rhondda, but actually we're making very good progress. I can tell him that he may dispute this, but the figures that I have is that 92% of constituency premises have 5G have 5G coverage from at least one mobile operator, and that 72% of the land mass has coverage. The one contributor to this debate who understandably and correctly raised his concern about the lack of coverage was my honourable gentleman, the member for Strangford. We missed him the other day in a debate on broadband, but it is certainly the case that his constituency has a long way to go. And the shared rural network programme that we are undertaking at the moment, I think, will benefit particularly Northern Ireland, because the challenges in Northern Ireland are especially great, and I'd be happy to talk to him about what more we can do to roll out both broadband and mobile coverage in his constituency. But this does mean that we are beginning to see the benefits that 5G can offer, and in particular our ambition to achieve standalone 5G, which represents a big leap forward from non-standalone 5G. And to achieve that does require considerable investment. And that is something which obviously has to be paid for. We have set out in the wireless infrastructure strategy our ambition for for the UK to have nationwide coverage of standalone 5G in all populated areas by 2030, and this will extend high-quality 5G well beyond cities and the larger towns to all populated areas of the UK. Now, that will, as I say, require significant investment of billions of pounds by the operators, and that will have to take place at a difficult time with rising inflation and energy costs. So we have set out a number of measures to help operators deliver that ambition. Ofcom, for instance, is reviewing the approach to setting spectrum licence fees, and we're also working with Ofcom to update the net neutrality guidelines. And very recently, I was able to announce the launch of our 5G Innovation Regions programme, which will invest up to £40 million to help local and regional authorities realise the benefits of 5G and advanced wireless connectivity. Now, let me just briefly return to the main concerns that are raised. As I say, the competition aspects are not ones over which the government has any influence. It will be determined by the CMA, but obviously concerns that have been raised by honourable members in this debate will be on the record, and they are entirely proper questions which the CMA undoubtedly will take into account. In terms of the national security implications, as I say, that is a process for which there is now an established procedure. The honourable gentleman for the opposition is right to point at the role of the Investment Security Unit, which now falls under the Cabinet Office, but several honourable members during the course of the debate, I think particularly the member for Birkenhead and indeed the member for Strangford, raised concerns about the lack of parliamentary involvement in that decision. Of course, national security issues have always been kept confidential of necessity, but we do recognise that there does need to be some parliamentary oversight of economic security measures. So, for that reason, in March this year, the government did agree a memorandum of understanding with the then BEIS Committee, obviously now the Business and Trade Committee, setting out arrangements for parliamentary scrutiny of the operation of the NSI Act and the Investment Security Unit. This establishes arrangements to allow the committee to access the information it needs to fulfil its scrutiny role, including setting out key principles on how and when the government and the committee expect information to be shared and protected. And the memorandum acknowledges that the committee does have a wealth of experience in scrutinising the operation of the Act, and we are keen to give the committee the information that it needs to carry out its work. And obviously, the Intelligence Security Committee has a separate role in monitoring the work of the intelligence agencies, but it is up to them to look at whatever aspect of the work of the agencies that they should choose to do so. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to go into detail on a number of the issues that have been raised by honourable members, but I can at least recognise that this debate has provided an opportunity for them to be put on the record, and I'm sure that the questions raised, which are legitimate ones, will be properly taken into account when the merger is examined, both by the CMA and by, if it triggers the process under the National Security and Investment Act. On that basis, Sir George, I would like to thank members for their participation.
Then do Mishra to wind up.